I'm so
Hey, all
excited.
righty. So we are kicking off our series for right now is going to be called Food Foundations. And again, we're starting at the basement and we're going to build up. So let's think about this even as almost Nutrition 101, which I went to nutrition school, so I had Nutrition 101, but most people have not. Yes, you do have.
Right.
Most people haven't. So let's start here. The first thing I want to do is define the term calorie. Calories are a word that have been around a long time. We typically hear that word from the lens of calories in, calories out. If we've ever been on a diet or a weight loss approach, a lot of the conversation is reduce your calories. But why and what does it mean? So, a calorie, the definition of a calorie, it's a unit of energy. What does that really mean? Remember that we eat food for fuel. That fuel, that food gets converted into energy, cellular energy. It's how we function day in and day out. Most of us, I think, tend to think about calories as being bad, and I eat too many of them, and that's why I'm overweight, and it's these calories that are bad. I mean, that's the mainstream theme that I hear and see with my clients clinically all day long. And I'd love to sit here today and try to change some of that conversation. A calorie itself is not bad. We need to stop demonizing calories. A calorie is a unit of energy. It's how our bodies work and function. The analogy that keeps coming up in my brain, I often talk about cars because our bodies are our vehicle. So I always think of a car. Think about gasoline. In some ways, when we put gasoline in the gas tank of our car, in a way, that's a unit of energy, almost like a calorie. We don't decide one day, oh, I'm never going to put gas in my car anymore. Your car's not going to go. It's how it works. Your car works, it runs on gasoline. If you don't put the gas in, the car doesn't go. It's the same idea as your body. We need calories, that unit of energy for the body to work and function. And I think that's a first point in this basement layer of conversation. And we're going to add on to it because there's a much bigger conversation there for sure. But I think just as a basement level, we have so demonized calories as being bad. And I just want to remind us from a cellular level, from a scientific level, if you will, we need calories as energy. The next piece that we're going to talk about is macronutrients. Macros are another buzzword that are very much thrown around. Same question. Do we know what that really means? So we have macronutrients and we have micronutrients. Macro means big, meaning we need a lot of them. They should fill up the bulk of our diet. Micronutrients are a smaller component of what we need in our diet. Macronutrients are carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. And I just want to touch on that point for a minute. In my mind, we need all of those. We need carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. I think as a culture, so often we've gotten very rigid around certain macronutrients. We eat a lot of these and we don't eat these. Carbohydrates are considered the number one source of energy. Protein is really important for lean muscle, helping us to feel full. Fat has been so talked about as being bad. Oh, don't eat too much fat. It raises your cholesterol. But we need fat. And we're going to get more technical around all of this too. Fat is important, for example, for our brains. Believe it or not, it's important for our heart and for our joints. The thing about the macro conversation is it isn't just black and white. And I know, Abby, in just a minute, you're going to get a little deeper on all of this, and I'm really excited to have you share. But from my lens, I don't necessarily, so from a clinical setting, when I'm working one-on-one with clients, I don't really follow a macro diet or a macro approach. You need to eat this much carb, this much protein, this much fat. I'm not saying that's wrong, first of all. I think always looking at your balance is not a bad thing. But at the end of the day, I always come back to what is the quality of the food and how do you feel? Not just the rules of I eat this many carbs, proteins, and fats, but how's it working for you as an individual? And I always come back to that part. But I know, Abby, you're going to share much more about macros, and I'm excited to lean into that. So tell us some more about macros.
More about macros. Okay, so I'm actually going to pull up a chart that I found on Google. I don't know where this came from. It's not like nobody said this is, they didn't stake their claim on it, which is why I'm sharing it. But this chart, it gives, I don't know how well that can be seen.
I
Okay.
think it's good. Yeah.
What I liked about this chart is that it's got carbs, proteins, and fats listed, but it also demonstrates that there's some overlap between them. And I don't want to jump into that just yet, but I do want to table that here short for a minute. So we're looking at carbs, proteins, and fats. So carbs come from things like fruits and vegetables and beans and breads and maple syrup and honey and potatoes and grains, pasta, all of those kinds of things fall under the umbrella of what is a carbohydrate. A protein comes from animal proteins, your chickens, your pork, your beef, your seafood, all of those kinds of things. But you also can include things like eggs in that, under that umbrella, specifically the protein of the egg or the egg white. I said seafood already. And some dairy, right? There's Greek yogurt, there's milk, there's those kinds of things. So those also have protein in them. And then if we jump to the fats column, we're looking at things like your vegetable oils, your olive oils, your avocado oils. We're looking at things like nuts, butter, ghee, coconut, your egg yolks. So nut butters. So those are like I look at I don't want to make too many analogies because I don't want to be confusing to people, but if you think about carbs, protein, and fats as the primary colors of the foods that we eat, then we can get into these two other columns, the green column and the purple column, where there's some overlap, where there are foods that can be both carbs and proteins, and foods that can be both proteins and fats. So Megan, jump in here if I'm getting confusing. Okay.
Hope you're doing great,
So,
Abby.
so things that are, and some foods are going to be combinations. And depending on how you choose to use them on your plate can work for you or it can work against you. So carbs and proteins, beans, quinoa, yogurt, milk, ice cream. And just a side note, Megan, I don't know if you heard this, or there was some news report a couple weeks ago that a study had been done about ice cream not being that bad for you.
Oh,
I don't know if you heard about that.
I did
So,
not. I'll have to look that one
okay.
up.
And I was just like, oh, shoot me now,
There
right?
we go.
Because yeah, so that's a whole other conversation. Okay, so come back to the purple segment on this. And now we're shifting from to foods that have both fats and protein, which serve a completely different purpose. So your fatty fish like salmon and tuna, eggs, cheese, cream, chia seeds are a combination of protein and fat. And you just looking down this list, I think most people who look at this are going to see how that overlaps. Um, yeah, hemp seeds too. I would say, I would even go so far as to say some nuts or many nuts can fall under that protein and fat
Mhm.
column, even though it's not specifically laid out there. Um, and so, if, for example, you are following a plant-based diet, like Megan and I have kind of touched on before, and you start consuming a ton of chickpeas or navy beans or kidney beans because you think that that's good protein, it is. However, you also have to consider how much you're consuming because of the carb count. I'm going to swing back the other direction and talk about nuts and dried fruits for a minute. It's the same principle. Um, Nuts are really high in fat content and they do have some protein. However, they have a higher caloric load, which means they have a higher calorie count. So if you're eating a bunch of nuts, you're filling up pretty much on fat, not so much protein, and those calories are going to add up if you aren't conscious of how much you're consuming. How are we doing, Megan?
Doing great, Abby.
Okay.
100%.
Okay. Um, Dried fruit is another one that I think a lot of people think, oh, well, it's just dried fruit. It's healthy. Yeah, to some extent it is. However, dried fruit is also super concentrated with sugars, and it also has a very high calorie count. So does that mean you shouldn't eat raisins? No. But does it mean you have to eat the whole box? No. And you shouldn't. Um, so dried fruit tends to be higher on the carb side of things than it does fall into your protein or your fat. Although there may be a small element of those in there. Dried fruit is going to fall primarily under your carbs section. So I hope I've been clear, that I haven't caused too much confusion, but I hope you can also hear in how I'm sharing about this how excited I am, but also how important it is to understand the distinction and the combinations. Because yes, there are people that Megan and I work with who have breakfast that consists just of eggs, or they'll have just fruit for breakfast or lunch. So they're eating healthy foods, but they need to be eating them in combinations in order to hit all of the nutritional elements that they need for their bodies to function at a cellular level. So I'll hold my tongue and let you jump back in.
Yeah, Abby, that was great. Thank you. And I love, love, love this sheet that you're sharing. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
bringing this. I think this is where, again, from just a scientific conversation, we need carbohydrates, we need protein, we need fat. Those are the forms of energy or fuel the body needs to run. What I love that you and I are going to continue to try to break down is it's not just black and white of, oh, I eat 50% carbs and 30% protein and 20% fat. I think the misinformation on that, we really, I think in a cultural way, we kind of simplify these things. What we're really missing then is the type of foods really have a different impact. You can't, in my mind, I'm not going to tell a client to eat 50% carbohydrate because what I hear and what I think my clients hear is, oh, cool, I'm going to go eat bread and crackers and pasta, and that's going to be the majority of my diet. That's not what we're saying. We have to have balance, and the types make a difference. Abby, that example on dried fruits, such a good one. So
Yeah.
just as a little bit more with that, for example, approximately a tablespoon of raisins has the same amount of carbohydrate as an entire apple. From a portion size, just sit with that for a minute. If you're really hungry and you're thinking about having a snack, is a tablespoon of raisins going to fill you? Or is the apple going to fill you? So a food is not always just a food. Oh, it's dried fruit versus regular fruit. No, it's not. I also love, Abby, that on the carb list,
Yeah.
and you touched on it as well, vegetables. Most people don't realize that vegetables are carbohydrates. That is what a vegetable is. The amount of carbohydrate in a serving of vegetable is significantly less than the bread, the pasta, the cereal, the crackers, but most of us don't connect that. So when I think of telling someone, or in my brain, when I think of, I'm going to make 50% of my plate carbohydrates, I'm thinking I'm making it 50% vegetables, not bread and pasta and crackers and cereal. So the type is a big piece of this, and the portion is a huge piece of this.
Can I jump back in for a second?
Please.
We were talking before we came on camera about nutrient density, and I just want to kind of circle back with that because Megan has just set it up so perfectly. So going back to the bread example versus the vegetable example, both are carbs. Which of those two foods is going to have a higher concentration of nutrition or nutrients that our bodies can use to fuel us, to get us to do whatever tasks we have for whatever day? You're going to be able to get energy faster with eating a piece of bread or an English muffin or a piece of toast, because those are what's called, we're getting a little complicated here, but we're getting into simple carbohydrates, right? Breads, pastas, donuts, cakes, cookies, all of those are considered simple carbohydrates. They provide quick energy to your body to give you a little boost. And that's why when you eat them, sometimes you crash an hour after you've eaten it. Whereas if you eat vegetables, that doesn't happen because the nutrients in that food are more complex and your body is breaking them down to support your body on a more steady, provide more balance and to provide more of a stable level. So that's why women in menopause who wake up one day, they can have 2 Dunkin' Donuts and then the next day their blood sugar is all over the map. That's what's happening. And so, bad example, but I know where I was trying to go. You need to maintain, you need foods that are going to help you maintain that equilibrium of nutrients and energy so that you're not having high highs and low lows.
Amen.
Done.
Yeah. And Abby, one thing I want to touch on too, because I don't know if I've ever actually said it on camera, but I am very food neutral. I don't like to think about food as good or bad or right or
Right. Because
wrong.
there's no such thing as good or bad.
No.
No.
But what I do think about then is the individuality. So for example, if you are a desk jockey, if you sit at a desk for 8, 9 hours a day, so you're sedentary, you're going to have different nutritional needs. And it's not just black and white, the macros, it's how the foods work in your body. So again, if you're the desk jockey, you loading up on a bunch of those more simple carbs. Oh, I had, a bagel for breakfast, I had a sandwich for lunch, and I had pasta for dinner. Metabolically, your body's not going to probably burn that very well. Compared to, let's say, I don't know, let's say you have a really physical or an active job. Let's say you're, I don't know, 'tis the season. Let's say you're a roofer and you're up and down and you're climbing. Let's say you're more, maybe you're a weekend warrior, but you're training harder and you're working out 5 to 7 days a week and you're doing a lot of long runs, for example, or biking, whatever you enjoy. Metabolically, your body's going to burn foods differently based on some of these things. So again, this is why we can't have these one size all fits approaches because it doesn't work that way. And I think this is ultimately what gets more confusing then. Oh, I thought I should just, figure out what my macros are. And as long as I follow my macros, I should be good. Well, the type of food makes a difference. Our metabolism makes a difference. Our lifestyles make a difference. I mean, there's so many variables, and that's ultimately the work that I do with my clients. And then it's the work that you do too, Abby, as you're working to help clients get food on the table, is that consideration of what is your lifestyle?
Right.
And so again, I love getting into more of this around this idea of energy from food. So calories, this conversation of macros. Again, at the end of the day, I think we always have to come back to the individual person and what works for all of us, not this lump, one size fits all. If you follow this macro approach or this amount of calories, that's your magic answer. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. And if it's working for you, great. There's nothing wrong with that. I think so often in mainstream world, what I see is my clients are so frustrated because they've been trying to make changes. They're following a certain approach and it's not working. And I think it's because there's so much more than these just black and white concepts.
I'm going to stop the share here. I also think that some of the approaches are they either demonize certain foods or um, things start off really well, like people switch to the next big thing and they have great success with it. And then it stops working
Totally.
because they plateau or because their bodies have finally caught up to whatever that new the metabolics, or maybe the metabolics aren't working for them anymore, right? It's a shock to the system.
Yeah. And I hear it all the time in my office is, I did this diet, X, Y, and Z, and it goes both ways. It used to work for me.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's one thing I hear. It used to work for me. Now it doesn't. Or, hey, I switched to this diet approach and I got zero results. And there's a level of frustration.
Mhm. Yeah.
I followed the plan and it didn't work. Well, yeah, there's a lot more to it.
Mhm.
Abby, I want to thank you so much for today's conversation. And I'm so excited to be digging into more of these food foundations. I think this is going to be such a great journey
Absolutely. Yeah.
of looking at food differently. And to all of our viewers who are watching, please feel free to comment or feel free to pop us a message, reach out. You can message us here on YouTube. You can find us over on Facebook or Instagram. But let us know any questions. Let us know if any of this is confusing,
Have you had any ahas?
right?
I'd
Let us
love to
know
hear,
if
like, I didn't realize XYZ.
Let us know if you are one of those people who tried X diet and it worked for a little bit, or hey, I tried this and it didn't work at all. Let us know where you're showing up because we're going to keep, you know, building the house, if you will, but we're going to keep targeting in deeper and deeper. And we're really excited to be part of this journey.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. See you soon.